Okay, we finished the first series of Queer as Folk, and now it's time for Queer as Folk 2. The title card shows up as Queer as Folk and then just for number 2. And that's not series 2, but a series of 2 episodes. Not really a series, is it? That's just 2 more episodes. I don't know. Do you have an opinion on this, Zac?
So I suppose they're 2 45-minute episodes, and previously we've had 35 minutes episodes, and 2 times 45 is an hour and 30 minutes. So essentially, it's a movie. Queer as Folk 2 is a movie, hence why we've got movie numbering, maybe?
Yeah, that explains it. Hello and welcome back to Davis on Davis. This is the show all about the work of Russell T Davies, and today we're checking out episode 9 of Queer as Folk. This is the first of a sort of 2-parter he wrote to round off the series because, you know, the first series was so successful that people did not want it to end at episode 8, which we talked about last week.
And if you listen to the previous episode, we talk a lot about how we try to find the endings for all these characters and their particular final moments, and then all of that gets undercut with this sequel here. But I suppose during the course of the conversation, I think we'll kind of get to the bottom of why, in hindsight, it makes sense that the show always needed this sort of appendix.
Yeah, I think that's good. Now, last episode, I explained that I'm related to Madonna because my mother's surname is Fortin. She is from Quebec. And I'll let you know now that basically when the people came to Quebec from France to settle it and colonialise it and all that stuff, there was only one Fortin family that came over from Normandy. There was one family, Fortin, that came over, and, you know, and so all their descendants are related because there was only one family, Fortin. And Madonna's mum did have the surname Fortin, or maybe, but basically the point is that if you're a Quebecer with the surname Fortin, you're related to Madonna, and my mum is that, so I'm related to Madonna.
Woo.
But what about you, Zac?
So I'm not related to Madonna. I'm not related to Madonna biologically, and I'm not related to her by marriage anyway. But I suppose my connection is, so my granddad lives in a small village in Somerset. It's it's like the quaintest of little villages, and for me it's like the platonic ideal of a village. And in this village, there's many celebrities. There's my granddad, who's a celebrity to me, and to no one else. There's Deborah Meaden of Dragon's Den fame, and there was until very recently a woman called Lady Amber Leighton, who was, she sadly passed in December, was the mother of famous film director Guy Ritchie, famous for the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock films, the Disney remake of Aladdin, the upcoming Disney remake of Hercules, the film adaptation of The Man from U.N.C.L.E., the recent film The Gentleman. You know the picture, Google Guy Ritchie.
Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels also, right?
That's probably his most famous one that I probably should have...
Yeah, I was going to say, why are you listing off Disney movies?
Because in my head,
And remakes, even.
In my head, I'm going backwards. Because here's the thing, I say this fact to a lot of people who don't know films, because my friends who do know films, I say the word Guy Ritchie and they go, oh, don't like Guy Ritchie. And so when I try and say to people who Guy Ritchie is, I have to be like, did you watch the Disney remake of Aladdin? And they go, yes. With the one with Will Smith? And I go, yes. Guy Ritchie directed that. Which I suppose is not the most... No. It's like saying...
No, I'm just like, wait, Guy Ritchie did that? What?
Yeah, exactly. I suppose it's like saying, who's Jon Favreau? And you say, Jon Favreau, the director of Disney's remake of The Lion King.
Yeah. No, he did Chef, where he was a chef.
I love that film.
And Roy Choi taught him behind the scenes how to become a chef.
That's such a wonderful film. And so essentially, Guy Ritchie was, for those who know, he was married to Madonna for quite some time. They have a child together, who's always in the press these days. So essentially, Guy Ritchie's mother lived in this village with my granddad, and she was she was this awesome, crazy lady, and she would always come around for tea. And then one year, me and my mum were staying with my granddad for Christmas, and we bumped into Amber, Guy Ritchie's mum, in the local cafe. And we say, what are you doing for Christmas? And she says, Guy's really busy this year. He forgot to invite me round for Christmas because he's, I don't know, going off somewhere with the rest of his family. So she said, I'm doing it by myself. So instead, we said, why don't you just come round? So we had Guy Ritchie's mother round for Christmas, aka Madonna's ex-mother-in-law.
Wow.
So it's kind of it's a bit of a stretch.
In a way, it's a stretch, but in another way, like, Guy Ritchie's mum, who presumably has met Madonna, and so therefore you have those like 2 degrees of separation. I'm just saying that, like, if you go on Ancestry and you go up to like the 1600s or whatever, and you come back down, then you'll get to Madonna. Yeah,
but I suppose that's not as cool. It's like I knew someone at school who used to go around and telling everyone that Mary Berry was his cousin, which I suppose was true.
Did you know what cousin means, or oh right, no, in the sense of like, yeah, cousin, just
exactly
20 times removed and all that. Yeah. Well, that. I'm glad we've solved the mystery, or by which I mean I'm glad you've told the story now.
Sorry to everyone who had to wait a week for that. I hope it wasn't an anticlimax. Speaking of anticlimaxes, we're now going to talk about something that I sincerely hope is not an anticlimax. So after a year of waiting, we get the continuation of the story of Vince, Stuart and Nathan.
And it's interesting because this does not take place like a year later. At one point, we find out that Nathan is still 15 in this,
and Stuart is not yet 30.
Exactly. Yes. So no one has had their birthday since now. No one's been a little birthday boy. But some things have changed, because when we start off, we find out that Stuart and Vince are living together and they have a new place.
They're living together,
or they take a guy back to. Actually, no, they're not. But I know it's weird because like they talk about them both taking a guy home. And it's like, are they together now? Is this why they're taking a guy back? It's written. It is. I know. I did get the wrong impression, but thinking back to like the rest of the episode, no, they're not living together. They're just. You just wonder if they are when they walk into the same flat.
I think, because the big tell is that the fact that there's 3 of them. You see Stuart, you see a man we've never seen before, and then you see Vince trailing behind. Stuart's living in a brand new flat that we find out is on Canal Street. Clearly they must have no longer have the old set, but I think it's crazy that he just decided to move. It's not really, in this episode, they don't really touch upon, there is the topic of moving house later on, but they don't really touch too much upon this moving. But what I think is happening is that they have decided for funsies to have a threesome together.
Yeah, Vince is getting out of his shell.
After the tension of Vince is in love with Stuart, but Stuart won't ever have sex with him. Now they're basically deciding, we might do with a bit of a middleman. But then, as we very quickly see in this opening scene, and I think as you expect, Stuart's straight in there, he knows what he's doing, and Vince is clearly nervous, and there's not much happening downstairs for Vince when the action gets going.
He gets Stuart's phone to call his mobile, so he can have an excuse to leave. The thing is, Stuart always knows exactly what he's doing with sex, and Vince is like that, but for excuses.
I was really expecting someone's mother to be in the hospital.
Yeah.
But instead it's a neighbour is being broken into by some youths, I think he says, and so he's got to go and got to go help.
That's character growth.
I think he spent the time since the previous series generating new excuses and also new creative ways of using someone else's phone to phone his. That's very creative. Obviously, Stuart sees right through it because he grabs his phone, tells Vince to fuck off, and then hangs up and gets on with the rest of his now what is no longer a threesome but is just now a twosome, if that's a word.
I mean, that's just called normal sex.
And then that brings us to the title sequence where we see Queer as Folk 2. And also, it's probably not worth noting, but the title sequence is a lot more orange than it was in the previous series.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Does that mean... I'm trying to think what the literary connotations of orange are.
The literary connotation of orange is the fruit. It doesn't hit the way like red and blue and green and yellow do, you know?
But, okay, so in The Godfather, oranges symbolise death, I believe.
Okay.
I don't know, I've just been told that.
Well, is that because of pumpkins and Halloween? Like, I would not think of that as the colour of death, personally. but I'm not Italian, so...
I've had some very odd... I'm not entirely sure. There might be some cultural significance, so I don't know. I think I'm... Essentially, what I'm doing right now is I'm clutching at straws. I just wanted to point out that they decided to change the title sequence a little bit.
Yeah.
It's one of those where it feels, tonally, it's a bit of a different show now, straight away.
Yeah. Also, you feel like the production value's up a bit because we get some interesting set pieces. Like, we get someone on like a motorbike. Suddenly, it just feels a bit more action-packed. Someone gets off a motorbike, and I think it sort of pans up to see who it is. And I feel like the idea is you think that it's going to be Nathan.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Well, that's what I was thinking, because he needs to come back from London, right? You know, we wonder, is he still in London? And is this his dramatic return? But actually, it's Hazel. She gets off, and she's wearing like the leather motorcycle suit and everything. It's amazing. So she gets off the motorbike to go into a sauna, which is just like, what? It's kind of this moment just keeps getting more and more ridiculous. And then when she's in the sauna, someone says, you know, this is like men's only today, and she's like, whatever. And then she goes to reach Stuart who's in like a sauna booth, and she gets him to like come out so they can chat. It's just like they didn't need this to be the way she's introduced, but they were like, we have some budget, let's use it.
Well, because the wonderful thing is, as she walks in and after she gets told, you know, oh, it's Women's Day on Wednesday or something, she knows everyone else by name. Everyone's like, oh, hey, Hazel. It's like she is... There's a word that I hate that describes women who are like really close with gay men, so I won't repeat it because I absolutely despise the word.
Let's say she's a Mary Sue in that she's overpowered when it comes to social interaction.
With the gays.
Yes.
All the gays know her, and then she opens the sauna, and she's so bold because Stuart's in there, I think, having a threesome in the sauna, and then it was like, oh, no, and then she pulls him out for a conversation. And essentially what she's doing is she is inviting him to a wedding on behalf of Vince so that he can be Vince's +1. It's all very convoluted because it turns out all of a sudden we find out that there's a new family member that we never knew anything about, because I'm sure she was only invented for this 2-part special.
Blasphemy.
Vince's half-sister. And essentially Hazel says that she's going to bring Alex as her +1. I half expected Bernie to be the +1, but he's not. And then she suggests that Stuart should be Vince's +1.
Yeah, I think after seeing Hazel and Alex in the last episode of Series 1, I'm so glad that like that's carrying through.
Well, I think RTD probably realised they were such a great character pairing and was like, I'm gonna see that through.
Yeah, it's like in the interim they've been, you know, hanging out more and more often, and they just have a lot in common, you know.
We get a couple of other bits in the conversation. We get the first bit of a running joke towards the first half of this episode, where Hazel says to Stuart, she says, they found Nathan, and Stuart's response is to say, Nathan who? Now, from Stuart, I think that's a valid, like, he's already forgotten about who Nathan is.
Maybe he wants to pretend he has, because he doesn't want he doesn't want anyone to know that Nathan could make him beg. Right now, that's just between them. That's their... He wants to everyone else act like, you know, that they didn't go that far.
But when the joke comes up again with, say, I think someone says it to Vince, I think Stuart says it to Vince, and then Vince also says Nathan who. Now, has Vince forgotten who Nathan is after the whole him going and living at Hazel's for a couple of weeks? I mean, it does make you think, what was the events of the first season actually such an insignificant, tiny part of these people's lives?
Maybe to us, you know, we care about the character drama of like the love triangle and, you know, Nathan on his antics, but like when they look back on it, they're probably like, oh yeah, that happened around the time Phil died.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh yeah, and that also happened around the time Phil died. Oh yeah, you moved that guy shortly after Phil, but you met at Phil's funeral, but you know, you broke up eventually. I mean, it wasn't going to work out. I mean, you met at Phil's funeral. Phil died. Phil, yeah, it was just what if that's the way they look back on all these events is just as like the things that happened around Phil's death, and that's all, you know.
Maybe Phil gets a singular mention in this episode, so maybe you're onto something.
He does.
One other thing of note that I think Hazel says to Vince is, because she found out presumably from Vince, because Vince tells her, no, not from Vince. because she knows every gay in the village, she says that Vince, Stuart, and someone else were seen leaving Canal Street. And so she's like, why don't you just cut the middleman out, for God's sake?
Yes.
So she's got her sources.
She's babushka. She's got, that kind of informal community watch.
I will say, as I think I've said before, but now I'm going to amp it up. I love Hazel. She is a queen. She slays. She is mother. But she is far too engaged in the details of her son's sex life. I'm sorry. Love you, Hazel, but come on, calm down.
Yes, formal call out. Shots fired.
Speaking of her son, let's go see what Vince is up to. He's at work at the supermarket, and he is very cleverly. He's giving us the exposition for the wedding invitation that we've just seen. He's explaining to Rosalie, because clearly now we saw at the end of the previous episode that they sort of had this sort of. They're not going to be besties, but they're going to be work friends. They're going to get on. They're going to tolerate each other. And he's explaining to Rosalie that he's got a half-sister that he hardly knows who lives in Macclesfield. Macclesfield, for those who don't know the geography of the Northwest, is about half an hour on a train outside of Manchester. It's in Cheshire.
He's acting like it's hard to get to, but actually it's easy to get to.
Yeah, it's relatively close. It's not somewhere... It's somewhere that you could easily drive to for go out for lunch.
Is it like a commuter town? Would you say that like a lot of people in Macclesfield would live there to commute into Manchester?
Yeah, I'd say you would. I went there, a friend of mine was going to work there for a day, and I went to visit her for dinner, and like there were trains every 20 minutes basically to the centre of Manchester. But he hardly knows his half-sister, which makes sense for the previous series, the fact that she wasn't mentioned. But I think for what actually happens at the wedding, it's all a bit people telling different perspectives of these relationships.
Yes. So like another guy shows up and is like, hey everyone, drinks on me, and we're like, what's going on here? And it turns out that he's gotten engaged, and everyone's like, oh, congratulations. But this isn't as, and also because like they're talking about weddings, and like here's another wedding on the horizon. And I think they mentioned like another wedding. I feel like there were 3 weddings brought up at this point. Like, so there was something about wedding fever.
I think there was a passing remark about someone new who was getting married, but that was sort of insignificant. Whereas this becomes more significant.
Yes, because this guy who's engaged, wedding number 3, he is essentially competing with Vince for the same promotion. There's one position, they both want it. They got to fight for it, and people think that, well, if this guy is getting engaged, then he'll be getting a mortgage and all this other stuff, and so we should give him the promotion because, he deserves it as a productive, childbearing member of society.
Yes.
Or does bear mean to give birth, or child seeding, let's say, child seeding member of society.
There you go.
And it feels like Vince can't compete with that. You know what? That's some good social commentary.
Because there's this subtle moment where... Because we've established that Vince is very much like middle management, and obviously there's a promotion that means there's still places he can go. And then there's this woman near the office who clearly is far more senior. She's like she's doing the hiring or something. And she says, oh, we've sent over your note for your interview. We're down to the last 2. And then she makes a comment about... the business might pay for drinks tonight to celebrate so-and-so's engagement, so we might make it a bit of a party. And then she says, but you lot, every night's a party for you, isn't it? And then she walks away with the sort of the subtle homophobia.
Yeah, he gets profiled.
So it's interesting that we've celebrated the end of the previous series, Vince being out at work, for him then now to sort of now be suffering the consequences of people at work seeing him differently because of it. Even though Rosalie and a couple of the other girls might be all good with it, it is something that a lot of people would have been terrified that would affect their professional standing.
Yeah, I mean, especially since Section 28 was still a thing at this point. And obviously this isn't a school, but it is still this idea that this is quite an adult detail and not a family detail. If this guy can buy everyone drinks because he knocked up a woman, Vince should be able to let people know that that's not how he swings.
Preach. Preach, Louis, preach.
Meanwhile, Stuart is babysitting his nephews. It's finally happened. Because last time he didn't do it and his sister couldn't go on a date, but I'm not sure why she needs to drop them off with him. But, you know, he's a responsible adult now. He's doing his bit to support his sister. And so his nephews come round.
There's this really funny shot where they come in and he's talking to his sister. He's sort of been on the phone to Vince, and he gestures to the boys to go do something. And then the camera just cuts to this massive fuck off racing kit that's just taking up the floor of his apartment that you only see in this one shot so far. That is just so out of place. The editing made me chuckle.
And I think one of them asks to go on the computer, and he's like, okay, don't open the web browser or something, just play games or whatever.
He says, don't look at any of my work stuff. Obviously, that's my work stuff. You just play your games.
Yes, that's it, yeah. And so naturally, the kid does have a look, and, you know, he's like, oh, I love this website, Gay Sex Manchester or whatever it is this time.
It was... I wrote it down. The kid goes, oh my God, I love this. I love Big Cock City.
That's like how New York is a big apple. Manchester is a big cock.
This is a Big Cock City. This, I think, is a porn site, not a dating site. But I actually could be anything. I don't know.
It sounds like a porn site, like, you know.
Yeah.
This city is not inhabited by people who want to have sex with you. It's just inhabited by cocks.
And so the result of this is you kind of go, oh no, what's going to happen? This boy's been exposed to pornography. But the result actually turns around. This boy turns around and calls his uncle a puff and threatens to tell his grandparents, i.e. Stuart's parents.
Yes.
And essentially starts blackmailing Stuart and says, give me 25 quid, because he wants to like buy some sort of Tomb Raider stuff off this other kid. So he says, give me 25 quid and I won't tell.
Yes, and Stuart, with his infinite confidence, calls the other nephew over and says, hey, do you want to buy us some chips? And he gives him 25 quid. And he says, this is 25 quid. That doesn't cost that much. And he's like, hey, keep the change. You know, go buy us some chips. Go buy us loads of chips and keep it. He's like, I'm going to buy so many chips. And it's quite cute, actually.
It is very cute, I think.
The younger nephew must be like 6 years old. I think the older one is supposed to be like 9 or something, or 10.
They do say the ages later.
They do say later, yeah. So I'm like, why are you sending out like a 6 to 8 year old?
Because it's established that this new apartment is in Canal Street. So this apartment is in the centre of Manchester, and I've heard that Manchester in the 90s was actually very rough. After the IRA bomb hit and a lot of Manchester was rebuilt, it's actually like been quite gentrified and it's a lot safer than it was. So why are you sending a 5-year-old or for a 6-year-old out into the streets of Manchester? Gosh, he's clearly not good with kids. I
think, isn't Queer as Folk supposed to be a bit of a fantasy, or not a fan, but like an aspirational look at gay life? So maybe it's an aspirational look at Manchester as well. Who knows?
Maybe. It's RTD going, Manchester's a great place. I don't know what you're on about. Yes. Then, with the other kid out of the way, Stuart picks up this older kid, this really annoying little shit, he's stolen the place of Nathan in my heart for the child I despise the most in this series, and essentially carries him into the bathroom, sticks his head down the toilet and gives him what's it called? Is it called a whirly?
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
There is a technical term for it. I'm just sitting there as an aspirational producer, someone who's very familiar with filming risk assessments. I want to know how they managed to convince a parent chaperone to let them film this.
Yes! Because they don't like cut away or anything. Like you see it all happen, and you're like, you know, it's they got a stunt kid, is what I'm saying.
Rather than having the intended conclusion that the kid would be scared shitless, instead the kid ups his ante and now demands 50 quid a week from Stuart.
No, 100 quid. He's like crying through it,
and says that his dad wants access to the kids, and the mum won't let him, and the dad wants to go to court, and this boy will now say that Stuart has touched him if he doesn't get 100 quid a week.
Yeah, which what
for?
This wasn't, you know, the conclusion he was hoping for. He's not out of the he couldn't just violence his way into, you know, submission from his nephew.
This was not what I was expecting to happen in Queer as Folk 2, but I suppose it's Queer as Folk doesn't feel like a series that tackles issues. I say this in inverted commas. So one of the people that teaches me for my MA is a former Coronation Street producer. And he says that when he was a producer in the 90s, they didn't tackle issues. And I'm saying all of this in inverted commas. Whereas nowadays, this producer feels that television does a lot more tackling of issues, whereas you pick an issue and then you sort of make a character have this issue and you tackle it and you say something about it. And he was like, we never had that. And I think that television in the 90s did do that, but did it very subtly. And I think Queer as Folk isn't a show that tackles issues, but it is a show that tackles issues, if that makes sense. We've seen homophobia weaved into Queer as Folk. And although the show has never said, right, we're now going to do an episode where we're going to really look at the implications of homophobia, what we get here is we're not going to go into great detail and tackle the issue of gay men being accused of noncery left, right and centre because of the leftover stigma of them all being paedophiles. But it is a theme that is weaved in, and I was not expecting that.
And like the fact that this kid kind of knows about all that, knows that he can like say something like that, yeah.
Well, the fact that it's been this language and this tone has been introduced into this kid at such a young age is quite something. But I suppose it's very true, and I think the hope now is, because we're growing up in a post-Section 28 world, and I was going to say especially a UK that's celebrating LGBT identities, that's something of a debatable statement given the current world of politics, but we are living in a world where I think a lot more children are growing up with queerness being normalised, and kids will not be doing this to their uncles, I hope, nowadays.
Yeah, let's hope not. Anyway, on a lighter note, Nathan makes his return to Canal Street. They're just in the bar now. They're chatting, and he walks over and he's like, I'm back. It's me, Malonio. And
nobody is interested because Stuart has just said that he's shagged someone famous. We don't find out who it is. The only clue we get is Vince asks, did he still have the puppet? I have literally zero clue.
Bernie Clifton.
I'm Googling because I do not get that. Bernie. Oh, okay.
That's the only British puppeteer I can think of. All the others are American because they did the Muppets. Like that's the only British one I can think of.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, Stuart, by his own admission, is a man with such a massive world. He could have shagged a Muppet.
He could have shagged a Muppet. That's the name of the episode.
No, but so no one is interested in Nathan. We get a fantastic line from Alex who says, piss off Anakin Skywalker, we're busy.
Yes.
A fantastic dig at Nathan's haircut throughout this show. Because Phantom Menace would have come out in 1999, I believe.
Yes, exactly. There was only one prequel at this point. They weren't talking about Hayden Christensen. They were talking about kid Anakin, you know what I mean? Like
exactly, with that terrible bowl cut. So that's the reference being made there by Alexander, and I love it.
Yes.
I love it. But eventually Nathan manages to get his way in and manage to update people on, he's back from London, and he says that Donna's mum has made her change class to sort of be away from Nathan, because Nathan's a really bad influence, because you'll remember he made Donna run away with him to London. So it's a real shame that we are missing Donna, who is my favourite character in the show.
Yes. I think the actor couldn't make it because of scheduling. Yeah, it is yeah.
And then we also noticed at this point that Alexander has been sort of taken away by this woman and is talking to her, and something's clearly happening. But then he goes and takes the stage and sings a song, very drunkenly.
And Hazel is like, it's kind of showing pity and sort of alluding to something that's going on, and we find out what it is in more detail as the episode progresses. But yeah, there's something going on with Alex, and
yeah, apparently he's Hazel's new lodger number 2 and seems to be spending all his money on vodka these days, she says. A character that begins with D, who is associated with Nathan, does make a return though, because we find that Daniel is working behind the bar.
Yes.
And Nathan goes to catch up with him. And we find out that Daniel's shagged Stuart the other week.
Yeah, that's like the news. It's like, when is it your turn? Kind of feels like the way it's discussed,
When do you become a regular on Canal Street? Oh, it's when you've slept with Stuart.
Yeah. Ask not whom the Stuart tolls for, it tolls for you, you know.
That's silly. Sorry, that's funny though. And Nathan basically asks Daniel what time he finishes, because we basically tell there's still some sort of chemistry, some sort of tension going on between them. And then the camera sort of just lingers on Stuart, and as he looks around, everyone happening around him, and we get the revelation from him that it's all just kids in the bar.
It's all kids. And once again, he is still 29. Like, he is not old. I'm sorry, but he is not old.
No, he's not.
It seems like, yeah, but everyone here is just younger than him. Like, because we know that Alex is like mid-20s, and I presume Daniel is going to be like 19 or early 20s.
Well, that's what I was going to. I was going to ask, do we ever find out how old Daniel is? But I don't think we do. I think we have to presume.
He talks about going back to college and stuff, so I feel like he must be at least 18.
I reckon so. He doesn't seem to be as much of a scandal as Nathan is. As a 15-year-old.
No, exactly. Yeah.
One more thing we do find out before we go to the first ad break, because now in these extra long specials, we get 2 ad breaks. We find out that the thing that's happened with Alex is that his dad has had a stroke. And I think I almost forgot at the first moment, but we have to remember that Alexander's parents are those homophobes that we remember seeing in the street when the gang was out shopping, who completely ignored their son.
Yeah, like they've completely disowned Alex, you know, like, and it's still tearing him up that one of them is going to die. And it's, you know what it is? It's unrequited love.
You think?
I think
that's a nice sentiment, but I
think it's a tragic.
I think we'll talk about it more, but I
think for now let's bottle that up and discuss it later, you know.
Because it's wedding time.
Let's go. Wedding time.
Bernie drops the gang off. We go inside and we're in a lovely country house. I'm just going to say it's like a country house hotel. This is exactly what I want my wedding to be like. I want to get married in a lovely big country house, have loads of guests. Actually, you know, this is really funny. So we meet Judy. I think Judy is Vince's half-sister's name. And I relate to Judy. Something about like the genes that Vince's dad has given to his 2 children. I really relate to these two characters, Vince and Judy. Judy gives Vince a big hug. Whilst Alex goes straight to the bar, and she is so glad that they're here. She introduces Stuart to her new groom, Adrian, as Vince's boyfriend, which then sparks some sort of drama between Vince and Stuart throughout the evening. But my favourite thing about this interaction, I just want to say before we go any further, which is what I relate to Judy so much, is she sees Suki. And after showing, she's like, oh my God, I'm so glad you're here, Vince, da-da-da-da, oh my God, Beth, da-da-da-da, you're my half-brother, da-da-da-da-da. She then sees Suki and she says, oh my God, Suki's my best friend. Adrian, you've got to meet her. I haven't seen her for years, but oh my God, I've got to see her. Oh my da-da-da. And she runs away. And my note here is, that'll be me at my wedding. I will invite people who I haven't seen for years, and I will tell everyone that they're my best friend. She's such a character. I love her so much. You know that meme where it's like, I've had her for 2 seconds, but I will do anything for her.
Yeah.
That's me and Judy. Hazel says to Vince that she'll go and find Vince's dad so they can have a chat. And we sort of get Stuart eyeing up the groom, and we get him being told, please do not shag the groom. Please do not try. Because Stuart seems to think that he's a bit fruity.
Yes, it's his gaydar does the thing that gaydars do, which is tell when people are gay. Because they're not actually real, they're inside your mind. I was like, do they make a little ping sound? It's like, no, they're just...
Yeah, Stuart doesn't work for the Home Office.
No. No, they have actual gaydars, yeah.
That was an inside joke for long-time listeners of the podcast, and by long-term, I do mean people that have listened to 2 episodes in a row. What we get is Vince having a pint with his dad. And again, it's another one of those, Vince's family gets extended upon so much that just aren't mentioned in the first series. And I can imagine... I mean, I don't know, but I can imagine RTD wasn't really thinking about Vince's dad being in the picture at all in Vince's life. But we do get a sense that he knows that Vince is gay. He knows that he works in a supermarket, and Vince tells him that he's a shoo-in for this deputy manager job and that he wants to buy a house in Didsbury. Didsbury is for those of you who don't live in Manchester, suburb in South Manchester, part of Manchester City Borough. And it's possibly like the nicest, the sort of most affluent part of Didsbury is one of the most affluent suburbs of Manchester. It's nice. Didsbury is very nice. Very posh, very nice.
Nice.
Vince's dad, and this is how you know that his dad knows that he's gay, is because he offers to financially pitch in with the house buying because he's paid for the wedding, or at least some of the wedding. And so he said, obviously, Vince, you're never going to get married, so I'm never going to be able to help you with your wedding, so why don't I just give you some money now? Which, again, it's one of those telling things. You got to remember, same-sex marriage was not a thing, and seemingly
15 years later
was not on the cards for it to happen anytime soon. Take that as you will. I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I feel like, sort of civil partnerships have been around forever or whatever. But actually, I do need to remember when I was like 5 years old, I went to my aunt's civil partnership, and that was when it was introduced. Like, that wasn't just because, to me, as a 5-year-old, it didn't feel particularly. I mean, obviously, it's a partnership ceremony, so you get wedding vibes, and you think, okay, cool. But like, it didn't feel like a particularly sort of groundbreaking concept. But actually, no, like that was when it began, which is wild.
But unusually, Vince essentially refuses and says that him and Stuart, because he's playing along with the Stuart being his boyfriend, he says, "Oh, we'll just get a house together because Stuart's absolutely loaded," and he doesn't. And the dad sort of pushes and says, "Oh no, let me give you some money," and he's like, "No, Stuart's loaded." And what's weird to me is we've already seen like Hazel. She borrows money off her son because I think she needs some extra cash. And then obviously Vince's dad he's doing quite well for himself, it seems, and is offering money, and Vince just refuses to take it. And I think there's sort of that he doesn't really have this connection with his father, I think, and so I don't think he'd feel it's right.
If I was in Vince's situation, this is woohoo, free money,
I think he's got a bit more of I think there is complicated family politics of taking money off someone that you're not close with, how he feels about that. I think he feels very independent, and he feels, with this job, this potential promotion coming up, things could go quite well for him.
Anyway, now we're back at school. In fact, Nathan has returned to school, which is interesting because, when he runs off to London, you think like that's such a shift, but actually it's like a silly thing he did as a kid, like that couldn't happen forever, which I think is quite interesting. It's like, what's the reality of like running off to London on a whim? And so back in school, he sees Christian, and he basically says that, I'm with Daniel now. You missed your chance. Oh, he girl bossed a little too close to the sun with that one.
Yeah, Christian does not like that. He's like, what does that mean? What the fuck does that mean? And then he threatens Nathan's like, you are dead.
You're dead.
As he walked into the scene when he meets Christian, he has that very recognisable swagger that we've seen him have throughout the previous season that has made us all want to punch him in the face.
I am nodding furiously.
And he loses that when Christian threatens him. I mean, I don't know. I've got this complicated relationship. I feel like Nathan has redeemed himself in my eyes, but now he's back making stupid decisions, saying stupid things, being arrogant again.
I guess we'll have to see if he dies next episode.
Back at the wedding,
Hazel recounts her history with Vince's dad, and she said she was 15, so she had Vince really young. Wow.
We get that parallel between an older man taking advantage of a 15-year-old between Stuart and Vince's dad. It's quite a clever little parallel that's there.
It's like the writing equivalent of Flower because it thickens the plot so much.
This one interaction that they had, I don't know why I'm speaking around the matter. This because I don't want to talk about straight sex. That's the very thought. Happened in the middle of Piccadilly Gardens, which is it's right in the centre of Manchester City. Crazy, but I can imagine it did happen. And of course, there was a war on in Vietnam, as Hazel was very quick to point out.
The 70s was a different time. Well, actually, no, it'll be the 60s because...
It did throw me a loop because when someone says there's a war on, my thought went to World War II, and I thought, oh God, this show really was a while ago.
I mean, but that's the joke, because there was a war on, in Vietnam.
I suppose in that sense, you could excuse... I mean, it's quite a dismal thought, but you could excuse any behaviour in any time period ever by the fact that there was a war going on somewhere.
Yeah, pretty much.
But we find out Nathan takes Daniel home to meet his mum for dinner.
Yes, and it's like they're so what? So are they a couple now? Is that are we making that a thing?
I think we're led to think at this moment that they must be, that he's Nathan's first proper boyfriend.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, like Daniel gets on well with Nathan's sister. You know, his mum is able to sustain a conversation with him, but he's like telling Daniel, Nathan's saying, "Don't embarrass yourself.
Don't say sex things.
Don't say sex things." Yeah. And what is also nice is that at this dinner scene, Dad is out of the picture.
Yeah, we find out that, as you spoiled in the previous episode, Louis, Nathan's dad has left home, presumably because Janice realised that he was the thing that led Nathan to run away from home. And I think Janice is a good mother that really cares about the well-being of her children, including Nathan, because Nathan's one of her children. And so basically goes, no, I think you're not conducive to this household.
I mean, just from a purely utilitarian viewpoint, you know, Dad can look after himself. Nathan cannot.
Although we'd like to think he can. So no, you're absolutely right. Daniel bonds with little Helen by basically saying that he once dressed up as Britney Spears, and I think Helen says that she also likes dressing up.
It's cute, yeah. It's very nice. And then he talks about like his aspirations and what he's doing, and he's like, oh, you know, well, right now I'm just sort of working in a bar, but you know, I'm thinking of going back to college. And Nathan's like, you didn't tell me that, and he's like, yeah, sure, you know, and like you can tell that Daniel is not suited to school and all that stuff. And you know what? Not everyone is. So fair play. But he is maybe a little embarrassed about that. He does want to he doesn't, you know, want to be perceived as stupid and whatever. And their relationship isn't great. It's just because they are just two people who sort of met and were like, we both kind of want to like survive in the world. Let's stick together, and that's maybe not enough of a basis for a relationship.
No, I completely agree. And as we sort of unpack that, when Nathan goes into the kitchen with his mum and they stand by the sink where we've previously seen Nathan and his dad talk, essentially Nathan keeps coming up with criticisms of Daniel, basically thinking that Daniel makes half the stuff up that he says. He calls him a twat.
Yeah.
Janice is like, why are you criticising him? It should be me who's criticising.
She eventually agrees with him.
Yes. And she does say you might as well be going out with a girl, given how girly Daniel is. I don't know how I feel about that line. It's not a line that's dated very well, I would say.
She don't like the femmes, clearly.
She should respect if Nathan's into his femmes.
But everything else, fair point.
Yeah. We cut back to the wedding. There's steps playing at the wedding. There's a lot of good music in this show, but every time I hear steps, I'm like, oh, I love that.
Yeah. And we sort of slowly find out, like, everyone thinks that Vince and Stuart are boyfriends. Everyone thinks that they're a couple. You know, Adrian is like, oh, sorry, I just kind of assumed because, you know, did Vince actually say explicitly at one point, you know?
I mean, the implication, so Stuart says to Vince that you must have told people, hence why this assumption is being made. And I think it's left a little bit ambiguous as to how it happened. That was what I got from it.
Yeah.
But Stuart seems to think that Vince must. So I think it's left to us to decide that.
But also it's just that they look like a couple.
Yes, they do.
And maybe that's sort of Vince's point a bit. You know, we're inseparable. What would you call that?
Yeah, exactly. Even though they're very clearly not. Because what is a boyfriend? Maybe this is personal life that I'm oversharing, but I very genuinely had this conversation last week with my own. I talk way too much about my relationship on this podcast. I know I've only mentioned it twice. But my boyfriend said, what is a boyfriend if not a best friend with whom you sleep with? I said with twice in that sentence, I shouldn't have done. So discuss. Because that certainly doesn't work for Vince and Stuart because they don't sleep together. Or do they?
Well, we'll find out in a few moments. Yeah,
we'll see. We get this fantastic conversation, and by fantastic I mean great to watch, not great to be part of, between the groom and Vince. Sorry, not Vince. And Stuart, because Stuart is trying to see if he can test out his gaydar. And the groom's talking about how handsome Vince is, and Stuart's like, "Oh, this is good material. This is it." And then essentially says, "It's such a waste." And Stuart again takes great offence because this is, you know, that sort of 90s inbuilt subtle homophobia. And he comes, and Stuart starts coming out with all these lines about how, and I apologise for the language I'm about to use, why is fucking the front better? Why is that not a waste? And so he then walks away from that conversation having made a very good point about it's not a waste at all.
And then we get an even better conversation between Hazel and Stuart. And I say better because this one actually, advances the plot, and it gives us more of an insight into Stuart because, we've seen him for so many episodes, but like we still don't know loads about him. Like Hazel asked Stuart if he's ever fancied Vince, and it's like, oh, actually, yeah, well, how are we able to know this? Because does he fancy Vince, or does he like that Vince fancies him? But he suggests that maybe he just loves him and he doesn't fancy him. And the thing is, you can love someone and you want to kiss them and then not get hard. When you get hard on, that's because you fancy them. And to demonstrate this, he kisses Hazel to show that he's not getting erect. I'm thinking like the writer wanted to get his little figurines of the characters together and just like bash them together to make them kiss. It's I'm not sure anyone was really asking for this, but we see Stuart kiss Hazel, and then Hazel actually kisses him back and says, "Oh, yeah, just to make sure." Is this the only way this point could have been illustrated?
There's a point to be made about the show may feel like it's grounded in realism, but it languishes in hyperbole and scenarios that wouldn't actually happen. So I think this is an instance of, before people start asking how consensual this was, I think it's drama here, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because Hazel does, when she kisses Stuart back, she does go with her hand and does check to see if there's any blood. Because they don't talk about erections, they talk about blood. Oh, and I know that's how erections work, obviously.
Yeah.
But they talk about, she goes, I'm just checking for blood.
Yes, Hazel is a vampire.
But I like, first of all, I like the fact that at the beginning of you introducing this conversation, you say it like the previous conversation I spoke about wasn't relevant at all and that I shouldn't be talking about these things at the podcast. It just makes me funny. It makes me laugh. And also, if we think back to the party episode, which was the penultimate episode of the previous season, whatever we're calling it, episode 7, we get that first conversation between Hazel and Stuart, and Hazel reads Stuart like a book. It's every time Stuart and Hazel have a conversation, we actually get to find out a little bit more about Stuart's psyche. So this is a brilliant pairing, and Hazel's such an important character for that.
Yeah.
That's all I've got to say.
And so after this, Vince and Stuart have a dance and decide to take it upstairs and go into this like pink suite, just complete, I'm wondering, was this meant to be the room for the happy couple or something? Because it is such an extravagant suite that they're in.
I think that's just the nature of the hotel.
Yeah.
I think.
And they sort of start undressing, and it's like, oh my God, they're undressing in front of each other. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And Vince says that he remembers that Phil said Stuart was saving Vince for his old age. This is why we find out that Stuart isn't 30 yet. So it's like saying, if we sleep together, is that it? Is that it? Does that make you old? And you wonder, is Stuart ready to become old? Is that what's about to happen? Is this happening? Is this finally happening? Are they going to sleep, together? They've mentioned Phil. That's like a really big callback. This is a really pivotal scene. What's going on? They sleep in the same bed, but they don't sleep together. They just kind of go to bed. Also, it's mad because it doesn't look like the wedding party is done for the night, but they don't go back downstairs. That's it. They just go. They just get some shut eye. They just clock out for the night and get shut eye, which I think is kind of weird.
I think that when they're taking their clothes off, the description for this episode on Channel 4's website says that the sexual tension between the pair is irresistible. And I actually thought it was quite an awkward, uncomfortable undressing. It wasn't a sexy, they want to take their clothes off each other. They're sort of going through the motions. It feels weird and awkward. I also noticed that Vince folds his trousers very carefully when he takes them off. This isn't an event of passion. This is a careful sort of just gonna fold my trousers whilst we are about to make sweet love to each other. Actually, let's not. Let's talk about our dead friend instead and go to bed. So you go into the scene thinking, yeah, they're not actually gonna have sex, are they?
No, sadly not. But what they do have is breakfast. They sort of come out the next morning, and it's funny because if you were at the wedding, then you might think, oh, did they finally demonstrate their love for each other or not? Hazel's at home. She calls them, and Stuart calls her to say fuck off, like stop asking us about what we've done last night. So like she went home.
Yes, because they weren't all guaranteed a place in the hotel. It was just that Stuart offered to Vince and said, do you want to stay here tonight? I can pay.
Yes.
What it is weird, and I said it before, and I'll reiterate again. Hazel is very explicit here about phoning Vince up and asking, "Did you sleep with Stuart?" When the pair went upstairs the night before, her and Alex were watching, going, "Oh my god, it's going to happen! It's only taken 16 years."
Yes, yeah. See, Alex is allowed to do that, but Hazel, that is your son.
What she says to him is, "Did you stay up late?" At least she's speaking in innuendo. At least she's not phoning up her son and saying, "Did you bang him?" She understands the concept of subtlety. But wow.
Yeah, and when they leave a hotel, Vince decides that he is going to fight for this job. He's like, you know what? I'm amazing. I need this promotion. He wants to like grow up and be an adult, basically, I think.
Yeah, he says there's only one good way of getting old, and that's with money.
Yes.
So then Stuart goes to see his parents, and there's some kind of house clearance going on. Is it that his parents seem to be moving house?
Yeah, I think it is. I think they're moving into a new place. It's funny that a lot of this is like, oh, we couldn't use the sets from last series, so...
Oh, yes, of course.
Let's have Stuart move house. Let's have his parents move house. Everyone's moving.
It's quite confusing, all this conversation, because then you've had the additional conversation of Vince wanting to move as well. Not only is it wedding season, it's also moving house season. But essentially what this means is we've got the entire... the entire Jones family together. We've got Stuart's sister, their parents, and then Stuart's sister's children, which means the little shit nephew is there staring down. Well, no, Stuart and the little kid are staring at each other. Obviously, there's that unspoken tension in the air of this kid could out Stuart any moment. So Stuart does the one thing that he can do to completely remove any power from this kid, because the kid starts talking about how where every time Stuart looks after the kids, Stuart's friends are always there. Someone goes, "Oh, so you've met Vince?" "Yeah, Vince and all these other boys come." And obviously he's leading up to something. And so then Stuart basically uses every single word in the thesaurus, every single phrase in Urban Dictionary, and essentially comes out to his parents every which way possible.
Yes, he's like, I'm gay, I'm a queer, I'm a fairy, I'm a puff, I'm a batty boy,
I've lifted every shirt.
Yes.
He uses every phrase, every slur. He describes every single action he possibly has ever done. He's like, I suck and I get sucked.
I fuck and I get fucked. I'm a shit stabber. That one's pretty visceral, Jesus Christ. And then he says, but I am not a pervert.
Yeah. And then he stares down at Thomas. And the boy's called Thomas.
Yes. And that is chills. That is chills. Here's the thing. I wonder how many people have done this coming out monologue as their like drama school audition.
Oh, you know, I'm going to do that. After this finish, I'm going to do my own rendition, obviously in private and not for drama school, just to see what it feels like.
It's a monologue, you know? They should have got Peter Capaldi performing this role.
And everyone is, I think the word is confused. People are shocked. People are confounded. Not least because Stuart has done this quite explicit monologue in front of the kids. I mean, I think it's the youngest is 8. I think we misjudged their age. Ben is 8, and then Thomas is a couple of years older.
Yeah, so like 10.
I think, is it the grandma? Stuart's mum basically tells the boys to go out and play whilst they talk to Stuart.
Yeah.
And then Stuart casually drops a line, "Did I mention I've got a baby?"
Yes.
And I hope that Stuart's dad puts 2 and 2 together with the baby that he's met. But the funny thing is, we don't know because we do not see the aftermath of this conversation after the boys leave.
We kind of get an idea of how it's being taken later on, but yeah, this scene kind of ends here, and we're straight on to the next thing, which is actually on Canal Street. Nathan and Daniel are hanging out. They're like sitting on like a terrace with a drink and stuff.
Well, that's Canal Street, Louis. That's what Canal Street looks like.
Yeah, I said a terrace with a drink. What?
No, I was going to say that. Yeah, because that is literally, that's just what Canal Street looks like. That is Canal.
Okay, but like a lot of streets have terraces with.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No, I was going to say because the way that it is, the whole of Canal Street overlooks the. I'm sorry, I wasn't correcting you.
No, yeah, that's why they're sitting outside. That's why they can see Vince and Stuart walking past. Because when Nathan sees them walking past, he realizes, like, that's who I want to be with. That's who I want to be spending time with. And he's just a bit tired of Daniel, and he drops him like yesterday's news. He says he doesn't even break up with him. What is it when you cancel a marriage by saying it never got consummated, or
he annuls their relationship?
He annuls their relationship. He says they weren't ever anything. I'm not breaking up with you. I'm just acknowledging finally that this is not anything to begin with. And so he goes and joins Stuart.
And he says to Daniel that he's going to go and chase after this boy that Daniel thinks has the nicest arse in Manchester, on planet Earth even. And instead, we just get this shot of our three protagonists, Vince, Stuart, and Nathan, walking together.
Because Daniel is trying to say, like, I can like the guy with the nicest ass because we're not exclusive, and then Nathan's like, we're not anything. For once, it's true that they were roommates.
Literally.
Although they didn't even get to that stage.
There's a brief mention of their flat that they planned on getting at the beginning of the conversation. So I suppose that was foreshadowing your joke all these years later.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what else was foreshadowing. The image at the end of this scene where the three men stood together. We then get a crazy scene following, because we go over to Hazel's house. Now, Bernie's outside the house fixing Hazel's motorbike. Janice, who Nathan's mum, who's got a bit of a friendship with Hazel now, is at her house. And then who rocks up? Stuart's mother, who turns out to be called Margaret, rocks up at Hazel's house. And it's basically like, oh, it's been such a long time, Hazel. So she gets welcome in. And then you realise you've got a literal mothers meeting. And who are the mothers but the mothers of our three main characters?
Yes, it's this kind of thing where you think, like, when Russell T Davies thought, let's end the show here at episode 8, how did he not think that we gotta have a reason for this scene to happen?
I think that this scene is the only reason that the second Queer as Folk 2 exists.
Yeah, it is an iconic scene because they discuss about like how it kind of changes once you sort of realize they're gay, or once they come out as gay, and also do you know it before they do, or is it a surprise when they come out, and all these different things. And it's such an interesting kind of conversation, and we've already mentioned before that like we'll discuss it more in It's a Sin, but they actually do discuss it quite a bit here. The role of the parent, and it is quite cute, and then they get on to the topic of anal sex. And the thing about anal sex is you actually can do it as a heterosexual person. Like, that is a thing you can do as a straight.
What?
And so they discuss their experience of doing it as straights. And, Margaret has never done it.
Janice did it once
and was like, nah. And I think Hazel's a bit more open to it.
Because she says you can read a book at the same time.
Yeah. Mother is mothering. But this cute moment is undercut a bit by like Nathan coming into the house and being like, oh, hi mum, because I think he was sort of coming over anyway for something, and Hazel is like, oh, could you just like occupy yourself for a bit because we're a bit busy now, and sort of Nathan doesn't pick up why that is. And then when he's there a little too long, and so like he kind of has to introduce himself to Margaret, and it turns out that this is the 15-year-old that her son has been sleeping with, and that pushes her over the edge a bit, that
the way that the conversation flows, in that the beats are Margaret saying that the whole gay world is like a foreign language, and Janice agrees, but it was Margaret's son Stuart sleeping with Nathan that introduced them and helped them start to learn this foreign language that they're really grateful for. But then Margaret doesn't realise how old Nathan is, and Nathan walks in. And then
yes,
Janice is talking about, because Nathan's got a birthday party coming up, And then she said, yes, this is my son, and he's going to turn 16. And that's the moment where all these jigsaw pieces come together to make a picture. And we just get her in the car, we just cut to her in her car with her hands in her head.
Yeah.
The interesting thing, which I hadn't put together before, because the next scene is Stuart in his flat with Alfred, with his father basically saying, we've got that thing coming up with the family. We think you shouldn't come. We'll see you next month, but, you don't need to come to this. His parents now go to Romy's to see Alfred, so they've got a relationship with their grandson. But the thing I think is coming together is that theme of Thomas, the little nephew that we don't like, accuses Stuart of being a nonce. Stuart says then when he comes out that he's not a pervert, but then the mum finds out that he has slept with a 15-year-old, and so all these things do look very fishy coming together.
Yeah.
And obviously we know that Stuart isn't a pervert, and we've had this whole debate at the beginning of the first season with the underage sex, and we have said that it is become normalised within this very specific context of this series, and then we're sort of given that burst of reality that yes, he did sleep with a minor.
Yeah, like his mum is, it is going to take a bit of time. I think for dad is a bit more trying to just live and let live and just, not think about it too much. But yeah.
Yeah.
And then we get a final scene, and this is sort of in this episode, although this is like part 1 of 2 for like the Queer as Folk 2, because I think all of these plot lines, they have sort of closed a bit. Like Stuart was threatened by his nephew and then he came out. We still don't know what's happening with Vince and his promotion, but he still has sort of resolved to get that promotion. He has like come to a bit of character growth here and decided, I'm going to get that promotion. Nathan has decided, what, I don't need to be with Daniel. This is dumb. So like they've all come to these little kind of conclusions, and their story isn't done yet, but they've had a bit of development this episode. Alexander, not so much. He's more stagnant, and his storyline is finally getting fleshed out more, and it gets cut in half. This is sort of where the next time kind of dramatically hits. This is the hook for coming back next week, I think. This is the scene where Stuart and Vince take him to see his mum and dad at the hospital. When he arrives there, only his mum is there to talk to him because his dad is obviously in hospital bed, had a stroke. And before going and saying, hey, come look at your dad, and stuff, she's like, we need to sign some paperwork. Can we go to, the cafe area in private, basically? Which is a wild way to start this up, but we know that these are not good people. We know that.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you want to say what the paperwork is?
Yes, it is. Well, I was going to say it should be very telling that these parents who want nothing to do with their son want to see him. But it turns out that this piece of paper essentially is Alex saying that he won't make a claim for the inheritance because by the father's will, everything will go to the mother. But I suppose Alex could make a legal claim, and he's then going to sign this waiver to say that he won't. And he signs it without even reading it, despite Stuart and Vince saying you should get a solicitor to look at that. He's like, I don't care.
Yes, because the thing is, because he's like, I don't want any money from it anyway. And her mum is like, okay, then you'll have no problem signing it. Like this sort of quite dark moment of they can only agree on one thing, and that's that they want nothing to do with each other. I think I said earlier, is this unrequited love? Because you really feel like even when the dad is dying, Alex's parents, still want to keep him estranged, to cut him out. And they only want him here so that they can, avoid any legal stuff later on, so that, she doesn't have to see him once the dad is dead. Instead of getting to this moment and thinking, maybe we only have one lifetime and we should try and reconnect with our son, they stick up with this. And the thing is, last time we saw Alex, he was saying hello, 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 and they didn't even register him, which was incredibly tragic. And now, he doesn't want to try the way that he tried last time. He doesn't want to get to the contract and be like, I don't want your money, but I can't believe you're this is why I'm here. I can't believe this is why I'm here. I don't want your money, but I do want you to have a look at yourself. He doesn't even try any of that. He's just yeah, I'll sign it. And, even when his two friends are saying, don't sign it yet, you got to read it through. And when he does sign it, they kind of say to the mum, like, this won't stand up in court. But obviously, if he doesn't want to claim any money anyway, then it doesn't really matter.
He won't end up in, no.
Even when they're leaving, he could go and see his dad who's dying, but he's like, no, I don't need to now, do I?
No, but that's why I say there's no unrequited love between them, because Alexander, who's such a flamboyant, outgoing character, he's so apathetic in this moment. This is I think the lowest we've seen him, where he just does not care, and he just wants to go about his life and wants nothing to do with these people who have deeply hurt him. It's
very sad, and for Alex, this is his little plot line of the episode wrapping up. But for Stuart, the plot line cannot be tied in a bow just yet.
Mm-hmm.
He goes up to the mum and he points a finger gun at her forehead. Just stands there for a few seconds, very tense standoff. Then he stops doing that and says, maybe next time. And Vince is like, don't make it worse. And yeah, it's to be continued, I guess.
Because he says maybe next time he won't miss.
Yes.
And then he walks away. And that's part 1 of 2 of Queer as Folk 2.
Yeah. So, will Vince get his promotion? Will Stuart's family be a bit nicer to him, I guess? And will Alex get, whatever closure you can get from an experience like this? Find out next week. Because this is this is the first cliffhanger of a podcast, isn't it?
I suppose, because yes, the Next Time trailer is so intense.
Yeah, there's fire and shit.
Whereas the other Next Time trailers in my head are all the same. It's all just club music, da, 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 and then just people dancing and doing drugs.
They're all next week for Doctor and Donna in a new location, and this is next time Donna is dead. I mean, that's just me doing the library where we think Donna's dead at the end of part 1.
Yes, yes we do. It is possible to understand the TV in ways other than Doctor Who Series 4, but I like the way you're doing this.
Yes, Guy watches a second TV show. I'm getting a lot of Doctor Who vibes off of this.
Checks who wrote it. Oh, okay, I see. Doctor Who fan learns that there's more than one TV writer in the world. Doctor Who fan decides to start a podcast celebrating that writer and only that writer.
Yeah, I think a lot of the Doctor Who Next Time and season arcs and all that kind of thing was inspired a lot by Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Mm-hmm.
So if you watch Buffy, you do get Doctor Who vibes off of it.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That's sort of such an important show for defining 21st century television. But that's a whole other podcast in itself, one that I'm not qualified to do, because I've only seen a bit of Buffy.
Oh, which bit?
A bit of Buffy.
It's very important you tell me which bit.
The first 2 episodes.
Okay, yeah, that is a bit. That is the smallest bit.
Yes, it is the smallest bit. I just wanted to sample it. I'm told it gets much better.
Yeah.
Because it was so camp and silly.
Brilliant. Well, I think we've been recording for long enough because, as we know, these episodes are longer. They're 45 minutes. They've got more action. So let's end it here. If you want to follow us, then you can. We have Instagram, Davis on Davis, and we have email, davisondavispod, all one word, @gmail.com. And if you want to let us know through the DMs or through email, any hot takes you have about the series, we're going to do a Queer as Folk audience response special podcast at the end,
bonus episode. Yeah,
so please get in contact with us to prepare so we can prepare for that. We want to hear from you, and if you want to follow me, then you can catch me at Louis on Air on Instagram and Louis on the Air on Twitter. And also you can check out Lit Lab London for the science communication stuff I do. It's events and parties and things like that. And yeah, Zach, do you have anything to plug?
Dear listener, I do apologise if this one is terrible because I came up with it in the last 10 minutes.
What do you mean you came up with it? I thought you...
No, obviously all this stuff is very, very real. I'm currently working on a campaign to sort of take the gendered stigma out of dad jokes, because it's not just men and dads who can make dad jokes. So you can follow our campaign journey at Girls Just Want to Have Puns on all social media. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Go follow us.
Beautiful. And yeah, catch us next week for the thrilling conclusion to Queer as Folk.
Bye, guys.